Hello friends, welcome to our channel. If you want to learn English through stories and enjoy listening to interesting and meaningful stories, then you are in the right place. We bring you inspiring stories every day that will make you think and reflect. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an exciting new story. We are here to fill your day with positivity and wisdom through the power of storytelling. So, sit back, relax, and dive into today's story. Let's begin the video. A footballer's dream. In a quiet town, far from the bustling city lights, lived a boy named Henry. His world was small, a few streets, modest homes, and a single patch of green where kids played. But Henry had a dream, one that was bigger than the town that surrounded him. He dreamed of becoming a professional footballer. He didn't have the fancy boots, the perfectly manicured field, or the latest football gear like the pros. He didn't even have a team to play with. His ball was old, worn out, and his shoes were barely holding together. Yet, every afternoon, after the school bell rang, Henry ran to the field. Alone, he practiced. Alone, he imagined himself playing in the big leagues. His family supported him, especially his father, who believed in his dream even when others doubted him. Henry's determination was fierce. He knew that the road ahead would be tough, but he was willing to walk it. After all, the best dreams were the ones that required hard work to reach. Henry's journey started when he was just 12 years old. He had been watching professional football matches on TV, his eyes glued to the screen as his heroes ran across the field, performing feats that seemed impossible. But as much as he loved the game, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was far from their level. He didn't have a coach. He didn't have formal training. All he had was the football field at the edge of town, the dusty ball he kicked against the wall of his house, and a dream. One day, Henry found out that the local football team was holding tryouts for new players. This was his chance, the chance he had been waiting for. On the day of the tryouts, Henry woke up earlier than usual. He could hardly eat breakfast. His hands trembled slightly as he put on his old pair of shoes. When he arrived at the field, he was surrounded by other kids his age, all of whom seemed to have more experience, better equipment, and more confidence than he did. He felt out of place, but he didn't let the fear stop him. He joined the line for the tryouts, hoping his passion would be enough. The coach, a stern man with a thick beard, blew his whistle and called the players to start. Henry was nervous at first, unsure of what to expect. He dribbled the ball poorly and missed a few passes, but there was something about the way he played, his raw passion, the fire in his eyes, that caught the coach's attention. At the end of the tryout, Henry wasn't chosen as a starter, but he was told to come back for more training. That night, Henry lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling both disappointed and hopeful. He knew he wasn't perfect, but he was determined to improve. He would prove to himself and everyone around him that he belonged on that field. After being given a second chance, Henry was back at the field, determined to make his mark. Every day after school, he would practice for hours. He ran laps around the field to build his stamina. He spent hours perfecting his dribbling skills, working with his old ball until his feet were sore. Henry's efforts didn't go unnoticed. His teammates began to see his dedication and slowly started to respect him. But despite his hard work, Henry couldn't shake the feeling that he was still far behind the other boys on his team. They were quicker, stronger, and more skilled. Some of them had been playing football for years. Henry was just getting started. The first official match of the season came. It was Henry's moment to prove himself, and the pressure was unbearable. His stomach was in knots as he put on the team's uniform, feeling the weight of the game on his shoulders. The whistle blew, and the game began. Henry started strong, sprinting down the field, trying his best to make an impact. But as the game wore on, things didn't go as planned. He missed passes, fumbled the ball, and his opponents easily outran him. The team lost the game by a large margin, and Henry couldn't help but feel responsible. As he sat on the bench, watching his teammates walk off the field with their heads held high, Henry felt a wave of self-doubt wash over him. Was he good enough? Could he really play on this team? Maybe football wasn't for him after all. When Henry got home that evening, his father saw the sadness in his eyes. "What's wrong, son?" he asked. Henry could barely speak. "I tried, Dad. But it wasn't enough. I'm not good enough." His father smiled gently. "You know, Henry, nobody becomes great overnight. It's not about being perfect from the start. It's about improving every day, no matter how hard it gets. The important thing is that you never give up. The road to greatness isn't easy, but the rewards are worth it." Henry listened closely to his father's words. It was as if a light bulb went off in his mind. He wasn't going to give up. Not now, not ever. He had a dream, and he wasn't going to let a single setback stop him from chasing it. Henry's determination was stronger than ever, but as the season continued, the road ahead became more challenging. The team had been working hard, and Henry had improved, but there were still moments of doubt and frustration. They had lost another important game, and Henry couldn't help but feel responsible. He replayed the events of the game in his head, a missed pass here, a poor decision there. It was clear to him that despite all the training and hard work, he was still falling short. He felt like he had failed not just his team but himself. At home, his father noticed the change in his demeanor. Henry, who had always been eager to talk about football, became distant. He stopped talking about the games, the practices, the drills. His mind seemed to be elsewhere. "Son, what's going on?" his father asked one evening, noticing the silence that had overtaken Henry's once joyful presence. "I don't think I'm cut out for this, Dad," Henry admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. "I try so hard, but it's never enough. I keep letting everyone down." His father looked at him thoughtfully before speaking. "You know, Henry, when you fall, it's not the end. It's a chance to learn, to grow, and to become better. Every player goes through this, every athlete and every successful person. What matters is not how many times you fall, but how many times you get back up." But Henry wasn't sure he could get back up this time. The weight of his own disappointment felt heavier than ever. As he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, the dream he had once held so dear now seemed far out of reach. The next few days were tough. The other boys on the team could sense his struggle, but no one knew what to say. Henry didn't want to burden them with his self-doubt. He kept his feelings bottled up, focusing on the next practice and the next match, even though part of him didn't believe it would make any difference. Then, come the most crushing moment. At the next practice, Henry made an error that cost the team an important play. His teammates, who had once supported him, began to voice their frustration. Some were angry, some disappointed. Henry stood there, feeling the weight of their words. After practice, the coach pulled him aside. "Henry, I know you're trying, but you're not giving it your all out there. You're holding back." "Why?" Henry didn't have an answer. He was afraid of making more mistakes, afraid of failing again. The coach sighed. "Fear of failure won't help you. You have to let go of that fear, or you'll never reach your potential. You have the talent, Henry, but you need to believe in yourself. Now, go home and think about that." It was the hardest thing Henry had ever heard. The fear had been suffocating him, and it had taken root deep within him. But as he walked home that night, something clicked. He realized the coach was right. He wasn't failing because he wasn't good enough. He was failing because he was afraid to truly commit. The next morning, Henry woke up with a renewed sense of determination. The fear that had held him back began to fade. He knew what he had to do: face his fear head-on, no matter what. That afternoon, he ran to the field, the cool air filling his lungs as he sprinted. It felt different now, as if each step was taking him closer to his goal. Henry spent hours practicing. He worked on his passing, his dribbling, his shooting. For the first time, he wasn't holding back. He gave his all, every shot, every pass, every sprint. He put his heart into it. His teammates noticed the change. Henry wasn't the same hesitant player he had been before. He was more focused, more determined. Even when he made mistakes, he didn't let them get to him. He just kept going, kept pushing forward. The next match arrived, and the pressure was on. Henry's team was facing one of the strongest teams in the league, and this game would determine if they had a chance at the finals. Henry stood on the sideline before the game, his heart racing. This was his chance. His chance to prove not only to his teammates but to himself that he could handle the pressure. The game started, and right away, it was clear that it was going to be a tough fight. The opposing team was fast, skillful, and aggressive. Henry's team struggled to keep up, but Henry's resolve never wavered. He played with a new sense of urgency, running harder, thinking quicker. He passed with precision, made bold moves, and supported his teammates. But midway through the game, disaster struck. Henry's team was losing, and the clock was ticking down. It seemed like all hope was lost. The pressure was mounting. In the final minutes of the game, Henry saw an opportunity. He was in perfect position to make a pass that could lead to a game-winning shot. But the fear, the same fear that had paralyzed him in the past, crept back into his mind. What if he messed up? What if he let the team down again? For a moment, he hesitated. Then, just like that, he pushed the fear aside. He took a deep breath, trusted his training, and passed the ball. It was a perfect pass. His teammate, Marco, took the shot, and the ball flew past the goalkeeper into the back of the net. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Henry's teammates rushed to congratulate him. But more than the victory, Henry felt a sense of peace. He had faced his fear, and he had won. As the team celebrated, Henry looked up to the sky, feeling a quiet sense of triumph. The road had been long, and it hadn't been easy, but Henry was no longer the scared boy who had doubted himself. He was a player, a true footballer. That night, as he lay in bed, Henry smiled. He knew this was just the beginning. There were still challenges ahead, but he was ready for them. He had taken the first step toward realizing his dream, and he wasn't going to stop now. Henry's game-winning pass had become the talk of the town. His teammates saw him differently now, not just as a boy with potential but as a key player who could make things happen under pressure. The coach began to take notice, too. Henry's name started appearing on the list of key players for upcoming matches, and the pressure to perform continued to rise. At the next team practice, the coach made an unexpected announcement. "Henry, I'm putting you in a new position. You're going to lead the team in the next game as captain." Henry was taken aback. He had never thought of himself as a leader. He was just a boy who loved football and wanted to do his best. But the coach's words stuck with him. The captain's role was more than just about playing well. It was about leading, inspiring, and motivating the team. Henry had always played for himself, but now, he would have to play for everyone. As the new captain, Henry quickly learned that leadership came with its own set of challenges. He was no longer just responsible for his own performance. He had to ensure that everyone on the team was focused, motivated, and playing their best. At the beginning, it was difficult. He wasn't used to speaking up during practice or games, and he wasn't sure how to encourage his teammates when things weren't going well. During one practice, the team's spirits were low. They had just finished a grueling drill, and several players were showing signs of fatigue. Henry looked around, and for the first time, he saw how much the weight of their expectations was affecting them. They were frustrated, tired, and beginning to lose faith in themselves. It was then that Henry realized what his role truly was. He wasn't just there to play football. He was there to keep the team united, to lift them up when they were down. Henry took a deep breath and walked over to his teammates, who were sitting on the sidelines, wiping the sweat from their brows. "Come on, guys," Henry called out, his voice stronger than before. "We're in this together. We've been through hard times before, and we can do it again. The next play, the next drill, it doesn't matter how tired we are. We keep going. For each other. We keep pushing forward. We don't quit." His teammates looked up at him. Slowly, one by one, they stood up. The spark was back in their eyes. Henry saw the change in their posture, their attitude. They were ready to work harder. And as captain, Henry had to lead them, not just on the field but in spirit. From that moment on, Henry began to embrace his leadership role. He encouraged his teammates, gave them advice when needed, and most importantly, he led by example. He wasn't the loudest on the field, but his actions spoke louder than words. He pushed himself harder in practice, showing his team that with determination and teamwork, they could overcome anything. The day of the next big match arrived, and Henry's team was ready. They had been practicing nonstop, and now they had to face one of the toughest teams in the league. The pressure was immense, but Henry wasn't fazed. He had seen his team come together, and he knew they were ready to take on the challenge. The game was intense. It was a back-and-forth battle, with both teams pushing each other to their limits. The opposing team was fierce, but Henry kept his team focused. Every time they fell behind, he was there to lift them up, to remind them of their strengths. And every time his team scored, Henry was the first to celebrate with them. In the final minutes of the game, the score was tied. The tension was palpable. Henry's team had possession of the ball, and it was now or never. Henry looked around. His teammates were all in position, waiting for him to make the play. As the clock ticked down, Henry made a split-second decision. He passed the ball to Marco, who had been playing exceptionally well that day. Marco didn't hesitate. He took the shot, and the ball soared into the net. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Henry's team had won the game. As his teammates lifted him up, Henry felt a deep sense of pride. Not because of the victory, but because he had helped his team get there. He had led them, not with just his skills, but with his heart. But just as things were looking up, Henry's journey took an unexpected turn. The next few games seemed to be an endless string of victories, and the team was on a high. Henry had proved himself as a capable leader, and his teammates respected him even more. But with every win, the stakes got higher, and the pressure mounted. One fateful day, during a practice, Henry felt a sharp pain in his ankle. It was just a small twinge at first, but as he kept running, it became more intense. By the end of practice, Henry could barely walk. His father drove him to the doctor, where the diagnosis was a sprained ankle, nothing too serious, but enough to keep him off the field for several weeks. Henry was devastated. The team was about to enter the most critical part of the season, and he couldn't afford to be sidelined. As a captain, his presence on the field meant more than just his playing ability. It was his leadership that the team relied on. The next few weeks were torturous. Henry watched from the sidelines as his team struggled without him. They won some games, but there were noticeable gaps in their strategy. Henry knew that without his leadership, the team was lacking the unity they once had. It was during this time that doubt began to creep back into Henry's mind. Was he truly important to the team? Could they win without him? The questions haunted him during every practice session he missed, and they weighed heavily on his heart. Then, one day, as he sat on the bench during another practice, his coach came over to him. "Henry, I know this injury is tough, but I want you to remember something. You may not be on the field physically, but your leadership doesn't end there. The guys still look up to you, and they need you to keep their spirits high. You're still part of this team, and your role is far from over." Henry wasn't sure how to take those words. How could he lead from the sidelines? How could he make an impact when he wasn't even on the field? But as the days passed, Henry realized something important. Leadership wasn't just about being physically present. It was about being there in spirit. Henry spent his recovery time working closely with his teammates, offering advice, encouraging them, and helping them stay focused. He even studied game footage to give them tactical tips. Slowly but surely, he regained his confidence, not as a player on the field, but as a leader from the sidelines. The weeks seemed to drag on as Henry's injury slowly healed. He worked tirelessly in rehab, pushing himself harder every day, knowing that the final stretch of the season was just around the corner. The clock was ticking down, and Henry was determined to return stronger than ever. The team had done their best to hold things together in his absence. They had fought hard and continued to win games, but they were no longer the same. They had lost some of the edge they once had. They needed Henry's leadership, his presence, and his energy to bring them back together. With only a few games left in the season, the pressure was mounting. Henry knew that the team needed him now more than ever. He had spent weeks on the sidelines watching, observing, and learning from his teammates, but nothing compared to the feeling of being back on the field. As his ankle finally began to heal, the coach gave him the green light to return to practice. Henry stepped back onto the field with a mix of excitement and nervousness. He could feel the weight of the moment, knowing that this was the turning point for the team. The first few practices after his return were tough. Henry was still shaking off the rust. His ankle wasn't 100% healed, and he had to be careful not to overexert himself. But his teammates welcomed him back with open arms. They were thrilled to have their captain back on the field, and slowly, things began to fall into place. Henry worked with his teammates to regain their synergy. They ran drills together, practiced new strategies, and most importantly, they spent time communicating. He encouraged them, reminding them of their shared goal, the championship. The bond between them grew even stronger. But as the games grew more intense, the tension in the locker room was palpable. The pressure to win was greater than ever. Henry had once feared failure, but now he had learned to embrace it. He knew that the road to success wasn't linear. It was full of setbacks, challenges, and mistakes. But it was through those moments of struggle that true growth happened. The final game of the season arrived, and it was a do-or-die match. His team had worked so hard to get to this point, and now, they needed to finish the job. Before the game, Henry gathered his teammates in the locker room. He stood in front of them, looking each one of them in the eyes. "We've come a long way, but this is where it counts. This is our moment. Remember why we're here. Remember why we play this game. For each other. For the team. We've worked too hard to let this slip away. We can do this. Let's give it everything we've got." The team erupted in cheers, their energy skyrocketing. Henry had reminded them of their purpose. They were no longer just a group of individuals. They were a team, and together, they were unstoppable. The game began, and right from the whistle, it was clear that this was going to be a battle. The opposing team was strong, aggressive, and skilled. Every pass was contested, every shot blocked. But Henry's team was ready. They fought with everything they had, and Henry led them every step of the way. There were moments of doubt, times when it seemed like the game was slipping away. The other team scored first, and for a moment, the energy on Henry's side wavered. But Henry refused to let them lose hope. He rallied his team, and they responded with grit and determination. With just minutes left on the clock, Henry saw the opportunity he had been waiting for. The ball came to him at the edge of the box. He could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had been in this position before, and he knew what needed to be done. He took a deep breath, steadied himself, and aimed. The goalkeeper lunged, but Henry's shot was perfect. It flew past the goalkeeper and into the net. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Henry's teammates rushed to congratulate him. But Henry wasn't finished yet. There was still time on the clock, and the game wasn't over. They had to keep pushing, keep fighting. The final whistle blew, and the score was tied. The game was going into overtime. Henry's team took a collective deep breath. They had been here before. They had faced challenges. They had pushed through the impossible. And now, they had one last chance to prove themselves. Overtime began, and the intensity reached a fever pitch. Every second counted. Both teams fought tooth and nail for every possession. But in the final minute, with the ball in Henry's control once again, he saw Marco making a break towards the goal. With perfect precision, Henry passed the ball to Marco. Marco, with no hesitation, took the shot. The ball soared through the air and hit the back of the net. It was a goal. The team exploded in celebration, and Henry couldn't contain his joy. They had done it. They were the champions. The victory was sweet, but Henry knew that his journey was far from over. The championship win had been a culmination of all his hard work, his sacrifices, and his leadership. But as he stood on the podium, holding the trophy in his hands, he couldn't help but feel that there was more to be done. The trophy was a symbol of his success, but it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The days following the championship were filled with celebrations, but Henry knew that he had to stay focused. He couldn't let the victory make him complacent. The next season was already on the horizon, and he had to continue improving. His team would be the target now. Every team in the league would be gunning for them, and they needed to be ready. In the off-season, Henry returned to his roots. He spent hours on the field, practicing his skills, fine-tuning his technique, and pushing himself beyond his limits. He was no longer the boy who feared failure. He was a player who knew that success wasn't just about winning games. It was about constantly evolving, about striving to be better every day. But with the rise of his success came new challenges. Henry was being scouted by top teams, and the pressure to make a decision about his future weighed heavily on him. He knew that moving to a bigger club meant more opportunities, but it also meant leaving behind the team that had brought him to where he was. After a long period of reflection, Henry made the decision to stay with his current team. They had been through everything together, and he knew that their journey wasn't finished yet. They had achieved greatness, but there was more they could accomplish. Henry's loyalty to his teammates and his belief in their potential were stronger than any offer that came his way. The decision was difficult, but Henry knew it was the right one. He had learned that true greatness wasn't just about individual achievement. It was about building something lasting, something bigger than yourself. As the new season began, Henry led his team with even more passion and determination. They had achieved their first victory together, but now, it was time to defend it. The ultimate challenge had begun. As the new season progressed, Henry found himself thrust into the spotlight in ways he hadn't anticipated. His team had become a formidable force, and the championship win had drawn the attention of both the media and top-tier football scouts. Every match seemed to be followed by a flood of interviews, press conferences, and social media buzz. Henry was no longer just a local hero, he was becoming a household name. At first, Henry felt exhilarated by the attention. The praise and accolades were a validation of all the hard work he had put in over the years. But soon, the spotlight began to feel heavier. The expectations were sky-high, and everyone seemed to have an opinion on his performance. He was constantly under scrutiny, and even the smallest mistake was amplified in the media. The pressure was suffocating. Henry found it difficult to balance his personal life with his new public persona. The constant demands of the press, the never-ending interviews, and the endless social media chatter left him feeling drained. He couldn't go anywhere without being recognized. Fans would approach him for autographs, take pictures, or simply stop him to talk about the game. His teammates, while supportive, had also noticed the shift in Henry. He seemed distant at times, caught up in the whirlwind of fame. They understood that it was a lot for one person to handle, but they also depended on him to remain grounded. They needed the Henry who had led them to victory, the Henry who had brought them together as a team. One evening, after a particularly intense press conference, Henry sat alone in the locker room. The sound of his teammates laughing and joking outside seemed distant, as though he were in a different world. He stared at the championship trophy in the corner, the one he had worked so hard to win. It had been the symbol of his triumph, but now it felt like a reminder of everything that had changed. "Is this what I wanted?" Henry asked himself, his voice barely above a whisper. The fame, the attention, it was overwhelming. The pressure to be perfect was crushing. He remembered a time when he had played for the love of the game, when his only concern had been improving, growing, and enjoying football. Now, it seemed like there was so much more at stake. Just then, Coach Walker entered the locker room. He had noticed Henry's quiet demeanor and sat beside him, looking at his young captain. "You okay, Henry?" Henry sighed, looking at his coach. "I don't know, Coach. This whole thing. It's more than I thought it would be." Coach Walker nodded. "I get it. The fame, the attention, the pressure. It can be overwhelming. But you need to remember why you started playing in the first place. You didn't do this for the spotlight. You did it for the love of the game. That's what's important." If you lose that, everything else will start to feel hollow. Henry nodded slowly. I've lost sight of that lately. I've been so caught up in everything else that I forgot what truly matters. Coach Walker smiled. It's not too late. You're still the same player, the same leader, the same person you've always been. You just have to remember who you are. Henry. The conversation was a turning point for Henry. He realized that he had been losing himself in the noise of fame and had forgotten the core reason why he played football. It wasn't for the recognition. It wasn't for the fame or the trophies. It was for the love of the game, the thrill of competition, and the joy of being part of a team. From that moment on, Henry made a conscious decision to block out the distractions. He stopped checking his social media every hour and began focusing more on his training, on his teammates, and on the game itself. He no longer sought validation from the outside world but found it within himself. As he focused on the game again, his performance on the field improved. He became more attuned to his teammates, encouraging them, pushing them to be better. His leadership began to shine once more. The media attention that had once felt suffocating now seemed secondary to the mission at hand, winning as a team. The turning point came during a critical match against a rival team that had been gaining traction in the league. The game was a high-stakes one, with both teams vying for the top spot. The atmosphere in the stadium was electric, and the pressure was immense. Henry knew that this game could define their season. As the game progressed, the tension mounted. The other team was playing aggressively, using every tactic to try and break Henry's team's defense. At one point, Henry took a blow to the shoulder and stumbled, but he didn't let up. He got back up, rallied his teammates, and led them through the toughest moments. The entire team followed his lead, and in the final minutes, they scored the winning goal. It wasn't just a victory, it was a statement. Henry had proved that he could handle the pressure, that he could remain grounded despite the attention. He had rediscovered his love for the game, and his teammates were with him every step of the way. As the season progressed, Henry's team continued to dominate, and they were on the cusp of making it to the finals. However, just as things were looking bright, a new challenge emerged, one that wasn't on the field. It came in the form of a huge offer from one of the biggest football clubs in the world. The club had been scouting Henry for some time, and they were offering him a contract that was hard to refuse. The money was significant, the fame would increase tenfold, and the opportunity to play for such a prestigious team was a dream come true for many young players. But for Henry, the decision wasn't easy. He had spent his entire career building up to this moment, but the decision felt like it might take him away from everything he had worked for. His loyalty to his current team, his friends, and the bond he shared with them weighed heavily on his mind. Could he leave everything behind for the allure of something bigger? As the days passed, Henry became more torn. His teammates knew about the offer, and although they supported him, they couldn't help but feel a little sad at the thought of losing their captain. It was a testament to the bond they had formed over the years that no one wanted him to leave, but they understood the magnitude of the decision he had to make. Henry spent hours talking to his family, his coach, and his closest friends. He wanted their advice, but deep down, he knew the choice was his to make. The pressure was immense: leave the team that had supported him and built him up, or move to a new club where the world was at his feet. One evening, after a particularly difficult practice, Henry walked into the locker room and sat alone, lost in thought. His mind was racing with doubts. Could he achieve more at the bigger club? Or had he already found everything he needed where he was? Was the promise of fame and success worth leaving behind the people who had become like family? Just then, Coach Walker walked in and sat next to him. "You've been quiet lately, Henry. I can see the weight of the world on your shoulders. Want to talk about it?" Henry took a deep breath. "Coach, I've been offered a chance to play for one of the biggest clubs in the world. It's everything I've dreamed of, but I don't know if I can leave. I don't know if I want to." Coach Walker listened patiently. "You know, when I was your age, I had a similar offer. A big club wanted me to join them, but I chose to stay with my team. It wasn't easy, but it felt right. Sometimes, The best decision isn't the one that seems the most glamorous. It's the one that aligns with who you are, who you want to be, and where you feel you belong. Henry looked at his coach. But what if I'm making the wrong choice? What if I could be something bigger, something more? Coach Walker smiled. You're already bigger than you think, Henry. It's not the size of the club or the fame you achieve that matters. It's the impact you have, the relationships you build, and the person you become. That's what truly defines a great player. Henry sat there in silence, contemplating his coach's words. It was clear that his journey wasn't just about football. It was about staying true to himself, his values, and the people who had supported him along the way. After a long night of reflection, Henry made his decision. He would stay with his current team. He had already found something valuable that couldn't be measured in money or fame. He had found his home, and it was where his heart was. The next day, he informed the club that he would not be accepting the offer. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. He was ready to face whatever challenges came his way, knowing that his true legacy would be built with his team, on the field, and with the love of the game. After Henry made the decision to stay with his current team, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. The weight of the choice had been overwhelming, but now that the decision was made, he could focus entirely on what was in front of him. His commitment to his team and his dedication to the game were stronger than ever. The season continued with incredible momentum. Henry's decision to stay had inspired his teammates. They saw the dedication and loyalty in him, and it sparked a renewed sense of purpose within the squad. No longer distracted by the outside noise, Henry led by example, pushing himself harder than ever. The league was nearing its final stretch, and the team was performing better than ever. They had faced countless challenges along the way, but now, they were just one step away from securing their place in the finals again. As the games grew more intense, Henry found himself more connected to his teammates than ever before. The focus now was on the ultimate goal, repeating their championship victory. But as the team continued to win and the stakes grew higher, Henry also realized something deeper. This journey wasn't just about winning trophies anymore. It was about building something lasting. He had seen firsthand how much the team had evolved, how much they had all grown together, and it became clear to him that this team, these players, were his family. In the lead-up to the final game of the season, Henry found himself thinking about his future in a way he hadn't before. He wasn't just playing for the victory now. He was playing for the moments he shared with his teammates, for the legacy they were building together. Whether or not they won the championship, they had already accomplished something that no amount of trophies could surpass. Their bond, their unity, and the respect they had for each other. The night before the final match, Henry sat alone in the locker room once again. The usual pregame rituals were in full swing, but he needed a moment to reflect. He looked at the empty seats where his teammates would sit after the game. The locker room, once a place of pressure and noise, now felt like a sanctuary, a space filled with shared history and memories. Coach Walker walked in, taking a seat beside Henry. "You're ready, aren't you?" he asked with a knowing smile. Henry nodded, his eyes focused on the floor. "It's not just about the game anymore, Coach. I've realized that this team, this family, means more than anything. We've built something that will last longer than any trophy." Coach Walker smiled, proud of the young player before him. "You've grown a lot, Henry. You've learned that football isn't just about winning. It's about the people you do it with, the journey you take together. No matter the outcome tomorrow, what you've done here is something special." The next day, Henry and his team stepped onto the field for the final match of the season. The atmosphere in the stadium was electric, but Henry wasn't nervous. He was at peace, knowing that this moment was just one part of something much bigger. The game itself was a battle, as expected. The opposing team came out strong, but Henry's team fought back with everything they had. The match was full of drama and intensity, with each side giving their all. The final whistle blew, and Henry's team had done it. They had secured the championship once again. The players rushed to the field in celebration, but Henry stood still for a moment, taking it all in. The journey had been long and difficult, filled with challenges and triumphs. But it was in this moment that he realized something. It wasn't the trophy that mattered most. It was the people around him, the journey they had taken together, and the legacy they had built. As Henry raised the trophy alongside his teammates, he knew that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. The journey wasn't over, and there were still many more challenges to come. But he was ready for whatever the future held. As the final whistle blew, signaling another championship victory, Henry stood on the field, feeling the weight of the moment. The cheers of the crowd surrounded him, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about everything that had led up to this moment: the struggles, the sacrifices, the injuries, and the challenges. But above all, he thought about his teammates. They had become a family, and together, they had achieved something incredible. In the days following the victory, Henry couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. He was no longer the young boy who had once feared failure. He had become a leader, a player who had learned the true value of teamwork, dedication, and sacrifice. The fame, the recognition, and the championships were all great, but it was the journey that mattered most. The media attention reached new heights after the victory. Henry was hailed as one of the greatest players of his generation, but he remained humble. He had always believed that football was about more than individual glory. It was about the team, about the shared experiences, and about the moments that defined their legacy. As the season came to a close, Henry began to think about the future. He was still young, and there were many more years ahead of him in his career. But now, he understood that his legacy would be shaped not just by his performance on the field, but by the impact he had on those around him. He began to take on more responsibilities as a leader, mentoring younger players and helping them develop both on and off the field. Henry wanted to ensure that the values he had learned throughout his journey were passed on to the next generation. He knew that football was about more than just scoring goals. It was about building character, fostering teamwork, and inspiring others. Henry's commitment to his team and his belief in the power of unity only grew stronger. He started to think about his role in the broader football community. He wanted to give back, to use his platform to inspire others and to make a positive impact in the world. His involvement in charity work, his efforts to improve youth football programs, and his drive to be a role model for aspiring players became just as important as winning matches. Years passed, and Henry continued to play at the highest level. But as the years went by, he began to realize that his true legacy wasn't in the number of trophies he won or the goals he scored. It was in the lives he had touched along the way. When Henry eventually retired from football, he was celebrated not only for his incredible career, but for the way he had changed the game. His leadership, his dedication to his teammates, and his commitment to making a difference in the world had made him more than just a footballer. He had become a symbol of the values that football represented: teamwork, perseverance, and the love of the game. As Henry walked off the field for the last time, he didn't feel sad. He felt fulfilled. His journey had come full circle. He had achieved everything he had ever dreamed of, but it wasn't the trophies that mattered. It was the people he had shared the journey with, the memories they had made, and the impact he had left behind. His legacy lived on in the team he had built, in the players he had mentored, and in the fans who had followed him through every step of his incredible journey. Henry knew that while his career had ended, his story was far from over. The lessons he had learned and the values he had instilled would continue to shape the future of football for years to come. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed today's story and found it meaningful. If you learned something new or were inspired, make sure to like this video and share it with your friends. We love bringing you fresh, exciting stories every day to brighten your day and spark your imagination. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell, so you never miss an update. We'll be back with more amazing stories for you. Until then, stay inspiring and keep learning. See you in the next video.